Welcome everybody to another Math Amazing video. Today we'll be solving quadratics by completing the square. Before we start, I just want to go over a couple steps. These are going to be steps that you can use every time that you complete the square. Basically, give you a little blueprint to go by. Step number one, we're going to want to get it into standard form. And what we mean by standard form is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Okay, and once we get it into standard form, sometimes your problems might already be in standard form. Sometimes you have to do a couple things like eliminating fractions or something like that just to get it into standard form, but we want to start out in standard form. Step number two, what we want to do is move c to the other side. So what that means is that from standard form it's going to look like ax squared plus bx equals c. Or in this case it would be negative c, just depending on what your value is. If it starts out as a negative, then it's going to be positive. If it starts off positive, then it's going to be a negative. Step number three, we want to multiply both sides by 1 over a. So whatever this coefficient is attached to the x squared, we're going to want to multiply both sides by that 1 over a. Step number four, we want to add b over 2 squared to both sides. Now again, this time, whatever the coefficient is attached to the x, we want to divide by 2 and square that number, and we're going to add that to both sides. And what we're going to be left with on the left side of the equation is going to be a trinomial that we're going to factor. So factor the trinomial on the left, and then you're just going to add the two values on the right. Step number 6, we are going to use the square root property. That is when we have x squared equal to p. If x squared equals to p, then x is going to equal plus or minus p. We're just taking the square root of the left side and the square root of the right side, and then we're going to solve the equation. So jumping into the examples, example 1, x squared minus 6x minus 13 equals 0. So step 1 was just to get it into standard form. Well, it's already in standard form, so we don't have to worry about that. Step number 2, move the c over to the other side. So here is our value of c. That is our c value, and we'll just write them up here. That's our b value, and this is our a value. Remember, since there's no coefficient here, we know it's going to be a 1. So we want to move the c over to the other side by adding 13 to both sides. So step number 2 was to move the c over, so we're going to get x squared minus 6x equals 13. Step number 3, multiply both sides by 1 over a. Step 3, multiply by 1 over a. Well, a is just 1, which is the same thing as 1 over 1, which is just 1. So we're multiplying the whole thing by 1, so nothing changes in the actual equation. Step number 4, add b over 2 squared. Well, what's our b value? Our b is -6. Since we're squaring it, we don't really have to worry about the plus or minus. But I can write it in here just to be sure that we know what b is. So -6 over 2 squared is the same thing as -3 squared, which is 9. So we want to add 9 to both sides. Remember, we're using this equation right here. So x squared minus 6x plus 9 equals 13 plus 9. So we added 9 to both sides. Step number 5, we want to factor this trinomial right here on the left side and then just add the values on the right side. So factoring this, we're going to get x minus, and we want factors of 9 that are going to give us 6, which is 3 and 3. We know they have to be the same. So x minus 3 squared equals 13 plus 9, which is 22. Step number 6, use the square root property. So we're going to take the square root of the left side, square root of the right side. Take the square root of the left, square root of the right. And so what we're left with is x minus 3 equals plus or minus square root of 22. And now we just solve for x. And so we need to get rid of these parentheses. There's nothing on the outside, so we just need to move that over to the other side. So we're moving the 3 over, plus 3, and we're left with x equals 3 plus or minus the square root of 22. So that means x can either be 3 plus the square root of 22, or x can be 3 minus the square root of 22. So writing that as our solution set, 3 minus the square root of 22 and 3 plus the square root of 22. Okay, now we're going to move on to example number 2. Example number 2 will have 6x minus 5 equals 6 divided by x. Now this problem definitely does not look like the previous one, but we're still going to use the same steps and we're still going to use the same process in order to get our answer. So step number 1, we want to get standard form. Well, in order to get this into standard form, first thing we need to do is eliminate this fraction. Well, how do we eliminate the fractions? By using the least common multiple. So to eliminate this fraction right here, we're going to multiply the entire equation by x, or the least common multiple in this problem, which is just x. So multiply everything by x. And that just means distributing this x to everything on the inside. So we're left with 6x squared minus 5x. And here in the last term on the right side of the equation, the x's are going to cancel, equals 6. So now we can either move the 6 over, or if you noticed that this is already what it looks like in step number 2. But we'll just start it, or we'll just put it over in standard form. So to get it in standard form, we're going to subtract 6 from both sides. And we're left with 6x squared minus 5x minus 6 equal to 0. So now we're in standard form. And standard form shows that this is A, that is B, and that is C. So the second step is move the C, move C to the other side. And like I said, if you noticed that this already had the C to the other side, you could have just moved from this step and just went on down to step number 3. But we put it in standard form anyway, so let's move the C back over to the other side. So we're going to be left with 6x squared minus 5x equal to 6. Step number 3. We're going to multiply both sides by 1 over a. Well, a was just 6, and so what we want to do is multiply everything by 1 over a, which is just 1 over 6. So we have our 1 over 6, and we're going to multiply our entire equation by that 1 over 6. Remember, you got to distribute that 1/6 to every term. And so what we're left with is x squared minus 5 over 6x equals a 1. Step number 4. Step number 4, we are going to add b over 2 squared to both sides. So what is our b now? Well, our b is now our 5 over 6, so we want to add 5 over 6 divided by 2 squared. And how do you divide fractions? Well, dividing two fractions, or a fraction divided by something, is the same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal. So this is the same thing as 5 over 6 times 1 over 2 squared. And 1 over 2 times 5 over 6 is just 5/12 squared, and that's going to give us 25 divided by 144. So we want to add 25 over 144 to both sides of this equation. So x squared minus 5 over 6x plus 25 over 144 equals 1 plus 25 over 144. Step number 5. We want to factor that trinomial on the left and add the two numbers on the right. So on our left side, we want to factor this out. X minus 5 over 12 squared equals, and remember on the right side we want to add these two together, so this has to have the same denominator in order to add it, and it's just 1, so that would be 144 over 144, and then we can add the numerators, so we have 169 divided by 144. And then step number 6, use square root. So we want to take the square root of the left side, square root of the right side. Square root of the left and the square root of the right. And that's going to give us x minus 5 over 12 equals, and since the numerator and the denominator are both perfect squares, the square root of 169 is 13. The square root of 144 is just 12. And we'll have plus or minus. Don't forget, when you take the square root, you're always going to have plus or minus whatever is on the other side. So just simplifying this, we need to solve for x, moving the number over to the other side. We'll add 5/12, and we're left with x equals 5 over 12 plus or minus 13 over 12. So x will equal either 5 over 12 plus 13 over 12 or and 5 over 12 minus 13 over 12. Simplifying these two, we have the same denominator, so we can just add the numerators. That gives us 18 over 12, which is the same thing as 3 over 2. And here we have negative 8 over 12, which is the same thing as negative 2/3. So writing it as a solution set, we'll have negative 2/3 and 3 over 2. So that's going to do it for today. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you learned something. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you're not subscribed. Thank you very much, and y'all have a good night. Bye.